So we'll just get started in the interest of time. I know we are running a little behind. My name is Anurag Mairal. I'm a professor at Stanford School of Medicine and also part of the two centers there, Center for BioDesign and Center for Global Health. And as part of my responsibilities, I've been working with health technology innovators around the world, including in India. And frankly, through the journey that I've had at Stanford and before that at Johnson & Johnson, have come across some remarkable innovations, remarkable innovators. What we have on the panel today are three of the most amazing innovators I've seen. The work that they've done has been phenomenal, and I will actually really go straight to them rather than taking a lot of time setting this up. I'll just say three very quick points. Healthcare around the world is in the state of flux. The way health and healthcare has evolved over the last few decades has created this whole world of global north and global south, where most of the access to health technologies that create major impact are in global north. But even there, our outcomes have not really sort of kept pace with the investment that we make. The US makes about 18% of its GDP investment in healthcare. Europe does about 10%, but Global South spends 2 to 3%. So there is a major crisis on our hands in terms of enabling access to healthcare, high quality healthcare to everyone without increasing costs dramatically. And the only way that we could do that is through innovation. Health technology innovation bends the cost outcome curve. It also enhances impact. There's also something else that's happening. There has been tremendous evolution in technology landscape. AI is the latest on arrival. Smart medtech, which is anchored in semiconductors and other hardware technologies that are leading edge sensors that are miniaturized and so on. That's actually a major shift. And people call it consumerization of health. I actually call it bringing healthcare closer to homes and communities. Most of the healthcare that we see is in big institutions. It's very top-down, tertiary care-centric. Most of the money, people, and infrastructure capacity is in the tertiary care institutions. But most of the patients are at the primary care setting in homes and communities. So there is a shift that's happening, which is enabled by technology, and many consumer product companies are actually getting in on it. But I think they're still a little far away from it. But I think health technology community itself can play a major role in that shift. So those are the three trends that we see that could reshape our healthcare, truly make healthcare accessible to all 8 billion people around the world. And my hope is that what we hear today from these innovators is the journey that they have taken through mostly in the developed markets, but also how do they bring the technologies to underserved communities, under-resourced communities. That's going to be part of my conversation with them as well. So let me invite each of the three panelists to sort of share the innovations they're working on, their journey. And then once we're done, those opening remarks, we'll sit down and get into a conversation, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So Reena, is there a order in which these presentations are set up? Okay. Which one's the first one? Why don't we pull up the first one, and then whichever one gets pulled up goes first.
Good idea. All right, perfect.
Yeah, so Jan, you get the first tips.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and to kind of discuss a little bit the journey that we've been going through in our companies, FLUIDDA and MedImprove, and how we think it could reshape the future, in our case, of respiratory medicine. A lot of people are suffering from lung diseases, so more than 110 million people in the US and Europe. The big groups, obviously asthma, COPD, but also a lot of COVID we see, a lot of interstitial disease, etc. Maybe they can hear, but okay. More than $300 billion is spent on respiratory diseases. And a lot of these patients are suboptimally treated. And one of the reasons they are suboptimally treated is that one of the main parameters that they use is called a spirometry, which is pretty much how much you can exhale. If you exhale into a tube, that's kind of the gold standard, but it's not a very sensitive endpoint. Sometimes it's complemented by these questionnaires or the number of times you end up in the hospital. But these insensitive endpoints, they actually have a lot of consequences. So if you look at trials in respiratory space, they're very long, large, and expensive. If you look at respiratory care in hospitals, it's often based on trial and error. Try a drug, try another drug, which in the end is also not very efficient and quite costly. So about 2 decades ago, we started developing what we call functional respiratory imaging. And functional respiratory imaging within FLUIDDA, we've developed this, and it starts from the conventional HRCT scans. And here we go beyond the visual read by a radiologist. So today, still the vast majority of these scans are only visually assessed by a radiologist, and I think they extract maybe 5–10% of the information that's embedded in those images. What functional respiratory imaging does is we convert these 2D CT slices into 3D reconstructions of anatomical structures, airways, blood vessels, lobe volumes, etc. And if we take an inspiratory and expiratory scan, we can make these static images come to life. At regional ventilation, we can look at area resistances, and we can even look at the deposition of inhaled particles. So just by taking these CT scans and using computer methods, for an individual patient, we can see where pretty much any inhaler on the market, where the drug would deposit in the lungs of that particular patient. And so we get a lot of information out of scans relating to lung and airway structures, parenchymal structure, including fibrosis, the blood vessel structure, the pulmonary function. So with FLUIDDA, we've been using this very successfully in clinical trials over a whole range of indications: asthma, COPD, pulmonary hypertension, cystic fibrosis, in silico trials as well, looking at the deposition, and working for a lot of pharma companies. So a couple of years ago, we thought it's going quite well. The technology seems to be adopted more and more. Let's see if we can also introduce it in the hospitals. So we got our 510K clearances, so CE, etc. And then we noticed that it's very hard to sell clinical software to hospitals. And we thought, well, why is it so difficult? And then we realized that if you look at any industry, you see that disruptive innovation typically doesn't come from the incumbents. The taxis didn't invent Uber, Ford didn't invent Tesla, AMC didn't invent Netflix, and the list goes on and on. So there's no real reason to expect why disruptive innovation in healthcare is going to come from within the large healthcare systems, within the large hospitals. We think that innovation in healthcare is going to come from new networks of outpatient clinics that are built around technology and data, focus on a specific therapeutic area, not like the hospitals that do everything. No, they have to be focused. You have on-site imaging and advanced diagnostics. You're focused on chronic care, not necessarily acute and emergency care. And you have an end-to-end solution, including rehabilitation. And that's what we're building with MedImprove. So MedImprove is a network of respiratory clinics, brick-and-mortar respiratory clinics, where the first thing a patient needs, obviously, is a CT scan with our on-site CT scanners. We use the FLUIDDA technology to see for that patient what really is the problem. Is it airways? Is it blood vessels? Is it mucus? Is it inflammation? So that our MedImprove physicians can prescribe the right drug in the right device. So we're sending the drugs to the right parts of the lung. Then we complement that with other diagnostics, other cardiopulmonary exercise tests, ultrasound, spirometry, etc., to further optimize the individual treatment program for those patients. And we all do that around a central platform which is optimized for data mining and AI algorithm development. And since we're focusing on rehabilitation, for some patients we see them 2 to 3 times a week. And so we're building up very structured longitudinal data ideal for AI purposes. Our first clinic in Belgium is doing really well. So it's my father who started that, who's a pulmonologist. Patients are extremely happy. They want to stay associated with the clinic. We see very good improvement in clinical outcomes, a good reduction in hospitalizations. And we make it center profitable within 2 years. Very important to scale up, profitable within 2 years. The first US center is opening up in Atlanta in January of 2025, so we're in the midst of building it out. And so we'd like to give it a very nice feel, make the patient welcome, to know that they're in a nice environment that they like to come back to. And the idea is to build more and more of these centers, double the number of centers annually to make sure we get a good number of patients under management, which allow us to obviously generate a lot of data, but also do a lot of clinical trials in this environment that's also optimized for that. So we are pretty bullish on the future of healthcare. And to quote Eric Topol, we're on the cusp of the biggest in healthcare, driven by the convergence of medicine and digital technology. So in the short run, we'll see technology in clinical trials with better endpoints in silico trials, like we heard before today. In the medium trial, we do predict that we'll see more outpatient net centered around technology and delivering the high technology care to the patients. So here's my contact details. If you'd like to stay, we're happy to do that. And thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'm looking to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. That's a remarkable solution. Not only do you have a sort of a technology that's anchored in digital sort of platform, but you also have a solution that's wrapped around that. And we'll come to that when we do a moderator-led discussion. Let's pull up the second slide deck. This feels like a little bit like pressure. Sorry? Siva. So Siva, you please.
Hi, my name is Siva Somayajula, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at AliveCor. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to advance the slide. Oh yes, we're there. So at AliveCor, whatever we do is guided by our mission. And we are focused on transforming and redefining the space of cardiology by making it more accessible, more affordable, and more patient-centric than it has ever been before. And here you see a snapshot of where we are at on our road to that mission. There are a lot of numbers there, but it's like 3.8 million lifetime users and 900K plus quarterly active users of our technology and services. And using our devices and services, we are collecting a lot of data. In fact, the company is in the business of electrocardiography, in case people are not aware of AliveCor and CardiaMobile brand. And so using our technology and devices, so we've been collecting ECGs from our customers at a rate of 1.1 million a week. And we've already collected 287 million plus ECGs. So we are collecting a lot of ECG data that is constantly feeding into our AI engines to making them better every day. And then, of course, we also have a lot of patents and global patents, and we are selling in 43 different countries and a lot of peer-reviewed articles. So what is the problem that we are solving? So the heart disease, right? This is the leading cause of death in US, and the costs of managing the cardiovascular health is totaling to hundreds of billions of dollars annually. And what's more, 80% of cardiovascular health could be preventable, and with the type of devices and services that we are building, we are able to detect some of these cardiac abnormalities early enough to be able to make an impact not only on the health outcomes, but also on the costs, both for the patients as well as the providers. And quickly, how did we get here, right? AliveCor has been a leading provider of FDA-cleared personal ECG devices powered by AI solutions, that put actionable heart health data in the hands of patients as well as providers. And over the past 13 years, we've built a portfolio of devices and services that span the entire continuum of cardiac care. So as you can see, we were the first ones to get FDA-approved personalized single lead device. This happened way back in 2014. And since then, we've launched the first 6-lead device into the market. And the Cardia mobile card is the first FDA cleared one in a credit card form factor, which I always carry in my pocket. And then we are also the first device to be FDA cleared for monitoring this thing called QTC monitoring. I'll talk about it a little bit later. And Cardiac Care is the first digital heart health service that we launched that provides cardiologist access to our customers. On that note, and it also comes with advanced AI that lets you detect 6 most common arrhythmias beyond atrial fibrillation, which our products are very famous for. And beyond that, we have a real problem in the US. If you try to get an appointment with a cardiologist, on an average, it takes around 26.6 days to get an appointment with a cardiologist. So we've solved the problem with our services. We've built a nationwide network, the 50-state network of cardiologists, and we are able to put our customers in front of cardiologists within 24 hours to be able to discuss their EKGs and general heart health. So in line with our mission of building comprehensive cardiology services backed by AI, we recently launched the most revolutionary device, which is the Cardia 12-lead system. I mean, if you have ever been to a hospital and taken an ECG on yourself, you must be familiar with a cart with a bunch of electrodes and then put all over your body to collect a 12-lead ECG. And this is what we have built. In case anybody can see it, the whole cart has been reduced to this single device that you can carry in your pocket. And of course, I mean, it comes with a single cable, right? Something like this, a single cable that runs all over your body. And it's a reduced lead set device. It's a revolutionary one that any doctor can carry it in their pocket. And what it can do with the reduced lead set is typically they put 6 chest leads, but then this one takes only 2 of them. And then it can detect the most serious cardiac conditions like heart attacks. So a device and technology like this is a game changer. It is expanding the access to problems, it's solving real problems. It ushers in a new era, even for AliveCor, to be able to make a real impact in our ability to save people's life here. And we are in the process of filing more regulatory filings within the country and also taking it all across the globe. And this is, as I talked about in our AI backbone, so this is an AI, this is an eye chart, but suffice to know that our AI is able to detect a lot of different cardiac conditions. There's a whole list of them, and this includes MIs and more serious conditions as well. And then in our growth for the company, we are doubling down on our core competency, which is ECGs, and then we are building more comprehensive cardiological solutions to address the B2B market as well. When I say B2B, there are multiple segments within B2B. So we are working with CROs, we are working with biopharma, and we are working with enterprises, payers, and employers, right? And AliveCor recently partnered with Clario, which is a CRO, and with this, the patients are able to take ECGs from their home. This clearly paves a path for decentralized clinical trials. And as it reduces the barriers for enrollment of these patients into clinical trials, they can sit at home and then take their ECGs, right? And then we are also partnered with leading biopharma companies in building AI-driven monitoring technologies for monitoring some of the serious side effects some of these drugs can cause in terms of QT prolongation. And this is applicable across multiple therapeutic areas. And GE, as an enterprise partner, is also an investor in the company. And then we are integrated, our Cardia Mobile 6-lead system is integrated into GE's native EHR system called Muse. And this has the largest installation base in the US hospitals. So with this, the ECGs taken from our 6-lead devices seamlessly show up into the physician workflows, thus enabling them to help their patients better. right? And we are also partnered with Fortune 100 companies to launch this first of its kind program called Cardiac Care Complete, which helps patients manage their cardiovascular health condition better. This comes with a slew of AI services as well as human-backed coaching services. And so finally, just to conclude, right, where we are heading. We also launched Ask Cardia as a part of our products, and which is a generative AI based product, and that will let you ask questions, very personalized questions about your own heart health, as well as you can ask questions about anything related to heart health. So this greatly expands the access of heart health information to our patients. It reduces the anxiety, and hopefully it also reduces the unnecessary ER and hospital visits. So that's the power of technology that this generative AI is able to bring. And finally, to conclude, right, and we are in the path of, we are committed, AliveCor as a company is committed to being at the forefront of AI innovation in cardiology. And this ties back into our mission of democratizing the access for cardiac care by offering this comprehensive cardiology solutions to all our customers across the continuum of care within the hospital or outside of hospital. Thank you.
Pretty remarkable. I've been a fan of AliveCor's work for a long time, and actually my colleague at Stanford, with whom I run the India BioDesign program, has one of your devices glued to the back of his phone, and he, I often see him, testing himself or screening himself. Well, I really like the idea of infusing your solution in the ecosystem, and the range of partners that you have is really interesting. And when we discuss, I'd like to bring up how much of that was driven by the hurdles that you're facing, and how much of that was a proactive sort of, chasing of those partnerships for market success. Because it's a very different way of doing the work that you're doing, different from how it used to be, a decade back. So last but not the least is Raj. Go ahead, Raj.
Thanks, Siva. Hey folks, Raj Venkata. I'm a senior director at Invisalign, which I'm sure most of you know about. It's the company behind the smile. Let me walk you through a little bit of our AI journey and how we've kind of transformed the entire journey for both patients as well as doctors. Align has been around for over 25 years. The slide is actually a little bit old. We're now celebrating year 27. And what many of you may know is, beyond being a smile technology company, Invisalign and Align Technology is actually an AI company. And the reason for that is exactly that. We've got over 18 million patients that we've treated so far with Invisalign. And so what that means from a data standpoint is we've accumulated this rich set of information, possibly the most information that any company has about human smiles anywhere across the world, right? With each one of these smiles, all the information related to a patient's scan, x-rays, photographs, all of that data is accumulated as part of every patient record. So you can imagine there are petabytes of data that we've collected over the last 27 years, right? And so that provides a rich data set for us to base off of our AI models. Now, in terms of the opportunity, there's over 600 million consumers worldwide that could benefit from Invisalign. I actually came from the cardiac world, where the opportunity could be on the order of a few million. So when I joined Invisalign, the scale was on a completely different level, right? And the way that we treat these 600 million patients is to funnel them into doctor offices. There's about 2 million doctors worldwide that could potentially use Invisalign treatment. And then the way we essentially get these patients to seek treatment is to funnel them in using our consumer branding and marketing, right? I'm sure all of you have seen the Invisalign brands, commercials. We do a lot of digital marketing with social media influencers. We're partnered with the NFL. We've got influencers like Charlie D'Amelio in the US. We've got a lot of influencers in APAC as well as in Brazil. So the way we educate consumers is by raising awareness about their healthy, beautiful smile, and then we funnel them into the offices of dentists as well as orthodontists, right? So that's the business model. Now, the overwhelming feedback that we hear from consumers is that they want to visualize what their new smile could look like before they commit to treatment. As all of you know, Invisalign is not a cheap treatment. right? It could be anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000, depending on where you live. If you're in perhaps a rural area, it could be somewhere in the $4,000 to $5,000 range. If you're, let's say, in Midtown Manhattan, it could be up to $8,000. So it's not cheap, it's an investment that you make in your future smile. So the feedback that we got from consumers was, show me what my new smile could look like without me having to go to a doctor's office, right? So I'm basically sitting on my couch at home, and I want to know what a healthy, beautiful smile could look like. So using traditional ML, we designed a technology where using a simple selfie, a patient or a prospective patient at this point in time is able to take an image of their smile, and what the app essentially does is it marks out the facial landmarks on a patient's face. So eyes, nose, corners of the lips, and so on. And it essentially goes back in our data set of 18 million smiles and picks out the closest match of a smile and essentially fits it onto that patient's two-dimensional image, right? It also does things like scale the teeth up and down to make sure that it fits within the smile of the subject. This works across adults, kids, men, women. So you can imagine it's a very easy way to visualize a new smile while you're sitting at home, right? So this came out a few years ago, and this is traditional machine learning, right? So this is a good start. What we heard from doctors and patients is, this is good, but can we do something a little bit more realistic and that's a little bit more personalized to my individual smile? And that's where in 2022, when the first version of ChatGPT came out, we were thinking, well, if OpenAI can train a foundation model based on all the data of the internet, why can't we as Invisalign, that has more data about people's smiles than any other company, why can't we train our own model from a video standpoint that can fit into a patient's face, right? And that's where the next generation of technologies came in. We're calling the smile video. What you see on the left there is the initial video of a patient that a doctor captures in the office. And then what you see on the right is essentially a personalized treatment plan for that particular patient designed by the doctor with the help of artificial intelligence. So it's essentially a generative AI model. And what we've done is we've taken a 3D model of a personalized treatment plan for a patient and fit that into the three-dimensional model of the patient's own face. And so you can imagine this type of technology is pretty powerful, right? If you set aside all the technical aspects around segmentation, we actually go through the exercise of segmenting out incisors, canines, molars, and so on in real time. But let's just set aside all that technical aspect and think about it purely from a human standpoint, right? Imagine not being able to celebrate or smile at your kids' graduation because you've got potentially crooked teeth or crowding. Imagine not being able to walk your daughter down the aisle on her wedding day because you're self-conscious about your smile. Those are the types of patient stories that we've heard from real patients about how this type of technology could ultimately change their lives, right? We, in fact, have many patients when they first see themselves in a brand new smile, even though it's simulated, they get very emotional, right? Thinking, this is the smile I should have had 30 years ago or 20 years ago. Because many of these patients have not smiled in many years or many decades, right? So that's the power of this type of video simulation based on generative AI. Now, let's say that at this point you're convinced, right? And you decide to accept treatment. The next step is, once you start Invisalign treatment, we as Invisalign want to make sure that you actually go through the process of completing your treatment so you ultimately get the outcome that you paid for and that you have patiently worked toward, right? And so we've introduced a new technology called Invisalign Virtual Care AI about last year in the US, where a patient can basically take images of their dentition at home using an accessory on their own smartphone. There are 3 levels of AI algorithms that run in the background. The first set of algorithms recognizes a patient's teeth in real time, and they guide them on how to capture the most clinically relevant photos that can then be sent over to the doctor and up to the cloud, where there's a second set of AI algorithms that assess the images, right? So you can kind of see here the AI gives you clear guidance on what to do next. it actually has a voice that will tell you, move the camera left, move the camera right, open your bite, close your bite, and so on, all in real time, using the models that we've built out. So you can kind of see here the patient is taking a set of images of their teeth. All the images are accurately captured. If they're not clinically relevant, the AI will actually tell the patient to retake the photos in real time, right? So ultimately, the patient captures all the images. They're sent up to the cloud. Now, this is where the second set of AI algorithms run in the cloud that automatically assess the patient's images and makes a determination as to whether or not they're tracking in their treatment plan. So the doctor essentially sets up a series of settings on what is considered good tracking for a patient versus what is considered poor tracking. And then based on those settings, the AI tells the patient, after processing in the cloud, whether or not they're tracking. If everything is good, the AI basically sends a message to their phone saying, hey, I want you to go on to the next stage or next aligner. If it is not tracking, the AI tells the patient, hey, stay on your current stage for an additional 1 or 2 weeks, right? And if the patient's completely off track, the AI basically tells them to go visit your doctor because there's some adjustments that are needed. All of this happens within the order of about 5 to 6 minutes. So the patient takes the images on their phone. Those images are guided by AI. It goes up to the cloud. It's assessed by a second series of AI algorithms, and then a third set of AI algorithms notifies the patient what to do next. Now, setting aside all of the technical stuff, again, if you kind of think about the broader human case of what we're trying to solve for, Invisalign's mission has not changed. Invisalign's purpose has not changed. Invisalign's core value of transforming smiles and changing lives has not changed. For us, what has changed is AI has given us an opportunity to increase the scale of deliveries that we have, right? To be able to reach a lot more consumers, get them into doctors' offices where the treatment actually takes place. And then AI has also given us a way to enable doctors to scale their services as well. So rather than have patients come into the office every 6 or 8 weeks, now a doctor can see a patient maybe once or twice during their treatment. During the rest of the time, the patient is fully remote in the comfort of their home. And this way, a doctor is able to scale their impact across thousands of patients, as opposed to treating only maybe dozens or hundreds of patients. So this is a way that we're able to enable the scale of doctors to increase as well. So this is just the beginning of our Gen AI journey. There's a lot more initiatives in the work to use Gen AI to scale our field force, as well as other technologies to help practices scale as well. So we've been pretty aggressive in deploying AI, both machine learning as well as generative AI. And my hope is that this journey is going to continue over the next few years. So, thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Invisalign is one of the best-known consumer brands in healthcare. It's a remarkable gathering here. We have 2 hardware companies, if you will, in different spaces. One very consumer-focused, one that is getting closer to the consumer. In many ways, it's actually bridging the gap between the clinic and the home and community. And then you have another company that's actually more focused on imaging data and leveraging it for screening and diagnosis and treatment of patients in a completely different space. So it's a pretty remarkable gathering, and it's a great put together panel. I'm going to be provocative with my question here. I'll start with this perspective. Like every single health technology company that I see now is talking about AI, and generative AI in particular. There's a lot of discussion around precision medicine. There is, smart medtech is a term that's being thrown around quite a bit as well. And I've seen, waves of really innovative technologies being incorporated in health interventions, some of which have worked very well, some haven't, starting way back in biotech era, where biotech was supposed to sort of cure all cancer, right? So my question to each of you is, how did the unmet need that you had, that you were focusing on, each of you, how did that assessment of that unmet need lead you to decide that you needed a more advanced solution, whether it's a device that you had, but then AI built on that, I think I know the answer to that, but I want to bring that up as a provocative discussion. Or the screening of patients with lung health that have lung health conditions, and leveraging all of the data and processing of that data to sort of identify patients and then helping them through the treatment pathway. And then Invisalign. I mean, you started off as an implant company, and I can see that you sort of brought in pretty substantially the AI to facilitate that conversation, that healthcare decision making in the dental clinic, and then ultimately going into the homes. What made you decide to pursue a more advanced technology path? What was it an unmet need that made you sort of say, we got to go in that direction? Or was it really cool to do, that's why you did it? So I'm going to start with you, Raj.
Yeah, for us, visualization has been the #1 ask, right, from both doctors as well as from patients. You can imagine something that goes on your face, your smile is very personal, right? So there's always a desire to kind of see what goes on your face. I mean, you can now put on makeup and so on and sort of simulate what your face could potentially look like. So there was an overwhelming need from both consumers as well as doctors to provide visualization solutions. That's one aspect. I think the second aspect
Can I interrupt you there? Let's make a discussion. But you were doing very well business-wise even before you had this solution, right? I mean, your implants were doing very well. You're a pretty successful company. What made you say that we got to do this?
Yeah, I think it's mostly consumer demand. A lot of the things that cannot be visualized have a very difficult time convincing consumers to go seek treatment, right? I used to work in cardiac for many years, and I understand that if you're a heart failure patient or if you're short of breath and so on, it affects your physical quality of life. But imagine like waking up in the morning and not looking what you see in the mirror, right? That's very visual. So the visualization aspect was the #1 ask from consumers. I think what has happened in the last few years also is that there's a lot more emphasis on video simulations, right? We've kind of become like an Instagram, TikTok generation almost, right? So there's a need to kind of see video simulations of yourself. So for us, the only way to generate those types of high quality, personalized simulations was through AI, right? There's no other solution today that can allow us to deliver those types of experiences. And then the last thing I would say is personalization, right? If your Amazon shopping experience can be personalized, why should your smile, which is intensely personal, not also be delivered as a personalized service to you, right? So between the emerging consumer trends and also where we're going with personalization, for us, we didn't really have a choice. We had to use AI. Now, luckily for us, we've got this rich data set of 18 million smiles, so we're able to pool that data and use AI to basically develop those solutions. So for us, it was a matter of necessity and consumer demand.
Sounds good. Thank you. I think that's spot on. I'm going to come to Jan. Jan, so Raj talked about personalized dental care. Personalized for you means something else. It's precision medicine, if you will. How did you decide? I mean, imaging, using digital health on imaging data for oncology and other conditions has been known. It's been very proven to be very effective. For lung health, what made you decide that you were going to use imaging data and do the analysis that you needed to develop the solution that you did?
Yeah. So maybe on that note, small. Maybe use the.
So a little bit of maybe personal background. So I'm an aerospace engineer by training. So we're using computers to simulate flows around wings, engine, the computational fluid dynamic. And my father is a respiratory physician. So about 20 years ago, he said, oh, it's kind of cool. You can simulate the flow in the lungs. Can you also simulate the flow? You can simulate the flow around wings, engines. Can you also do that in the lungs? And the reason he was asking that, because at that time he was a reviewer for the EMA. So the European FDA equivalent, and he was assessing these drug files using the conventional spirometry, which is pretty much blowing into a tube and measuring what comes out. And he said it's almost impossible to really understand what these drugs are doing if you just use this quite insensitive test. So maybe you and your flow simulations with medical imaging can help us to better understand not just what happens in those lungs because of the lung disease, but specifically what happens when you treat the lungs with specific drugs. Now, fast forward, the drug development scene in respiratory has changed quite a bit. So it used to be the development of inhalers, where the aim was to kind of develop blockbuster drugs, so to make sure you can prescribe it to as many patients as possible. Now, the new generation are all biologics, and the biologics are much more expensive, and the regulators and the payers will not indicate it for every asthmatic patient or every COPD patient. So the pharma companies now have to proactively subdivide the market, but they can't do that with these insensitive tests. So that's why imaging and more advanced imaging is becoming more prevalent. Now, the other side of the coin, in the care delivery side of things, the hospitals, it's different. There, I would argue, there is no need for more technology. There is need for better technology-driven care delivery. And that's where it is. So advancing the technology in that space, there's no point in doing that if you can't bring it to the patient. And currently, you can't bring it to the patient because the system is too fragmented, too siloed. The pulmonologists don't speak to the radiologist. They don't interact. So that's why you have to kind of reinvent, in our opinion, a little bit the care delivery element, and hence these outpatient clinics centered around technology. And that as a platform, I think it's only the start of what is possible with technology in that space. So you have to be careful where you are. If you're in the clinical trials, more technology, the better. If you're in the hospital space, of the care delivery space, there it's more around the logistics that you have to solve first.
Great answer. Yeah, I'll come to AliveCor. Now, AliveCor is very interesting. I mean, you started off with a really innovative device solution for cardiac screening and diagnosis. And I think it was a challenging journey. I mean, even though it was so innovative, it was ahead of its time. But you persisted, and you have a tremendous patent portfolio. You survived. In between there was a lawsuit with Apple, which made you very famous, but also kind of put you on the crosswires for all of these consumer product companies that potentially could take that market away from you. And then, I see that you're sort of building generative AI solutions on the data sets that you're building, and I can see where it could go for places like India, and I'm going to come to that a little later. But what made you convinced that that's the direction that you wanted to go, with the device first, and then with AI-enabled wrap around the device?
Yeah, actually, so there are a series of questions in there, but first, the AliveCor itself is founded by Dr. Dave Albert, so the initial innovation, and he still continues to innovate. And AliveCor is born out of the unmet needs that you mentioned. I mean, I just want to briefly touch upon how the world was before AliveCor introduced the personal ECG device, right? If any of you felt heart palpitations or anything, that uneasiness in your heart, before we introduced our technology, you had to go to a doctor and would complain to him about that, and then you may or may not be feeling, so what he would, feeling the symptoms at the time, so what he would do is ask you to go and take an ECG, which is a point snapshot. It's a snapshot of your thing there, and then 99% of the time they wouldn't catch anything. And then they would send you home with something called a Holter monitor, which still exists today. I mean, Zeo patch is one of the famous ones. And then very uncomfortable to wear, and then you have to wear it for 2 weeks, etc., and then hoping that it would catch it, right? So this was the world before we introduced the technology. And Dr. Dave, with his innovation of personal ECG, has made it so easy that when you feel the symptom, like you would take this device out of your pocket and then take an ECG, and then this is where the AI comes in. I mean, the device was launched with AI first in mind. Actually, AliveCor started using AI before AI was even cool or AI was being applied to any of the medtech that extensively, because the company itself was founded in like 2010 or 2011. So it's quite, we have quite a history of it. So each of the devices that we launched since then is like meeting those unmet needs, right? So the AI itself that we developed was the one that helped us, detect that atrial fibrillation and other 6 other types of arrhythmias instantly without the patient ever having to leave home, right? I mean, we got a clearance from FDA to show all these determinations directly to the patients. So that is one of the biggest unmet needs, right? So I mean, before I go on a long lecture here, actually the cardiac 12 lead is what I want to touch. The unmet need is the biggest story is with the cardiac 12 lead, right? But I'll reserve that for, yeah. But then the generative AI, right? I mean, the generative AI, I think I consider ourselves very fortunate that we are here. We are seeing a real revolution. We can say that we have seen a couple of them already, but I think generative AI is and the way that we are applying is just scratching the surface. So because we are able to use generative AI to give very personalized and useful information the moment our customer comes into the app, because we are able to process the data. Otherwise, the kind of things that you can tell the patient about their own heart health, now we are personalizing it, all thanks to generative AI, and this is just the beginning.
That's remarkable. I think you have me convinced that this was all done. Each of you did it based on the need, customer need, market need, clinical unmet need, and as a biodesigner, that's music to my ears. So thank you for that important reminder that innovation, and those of you who are going to watch the video later on, who are in the audience, I think it's important for you to remember that if your solution, especially health technology solution, doesn't address a very well identified, very well characterized unmet need, it's going to have a real tough time in the marketplace. I think their longevity and their success in the marketplace is an evidence that works, and we have a flip side of that as well in the industry. I wrote this book over the last 2 years called Reimagining Health, and it talks about flipping of the healthcare system, which is not all tertiary care centric, but bringing it closer to homes and communities. That's how healthcare used to be 100 years back. And then ironically, technology is what took us away from that into the big institutions and so on. But you guys are talking about bridging that gap, Even in your case, when the procedure happens in a dental clinic, but you're bringing a lot of this at home, which is remarkable. And you're trying to make things more personalized and sort of more aligned with the care pathway and so on. What's the business model that's enabling this shift for each of you, number one? And I'll add one more question to that, and then we'll open it up to the audience. You all are here in the US, which is the biggest healthcare market. We spend 18% of our GDP on healthcare. Now, our outcomes are not matching up to that. That's a separate question. Europe spends about 10% of GDP. Most of the world spends about 2 to 3%. How does your solution and the business model that you're developing, how does that relate to the 8 billion people, the 5 billion people who are outside of the 3 billion that you can serve today, potentially? So please talk about the business model, what enables your intervention, and I'll start with you, Siva, and talk about how does it sort of relate to the rest of the world.
The first things first, today, I mean, we have an established business over the last 12 years, and 90% of our revenues today are directly coming from direct-to-consumer market, which means that, 50% of our current revenues all come from software subscriptions. So the model initially, I mean, it took us a while to get there. So the initial business model clearly met an unmet need, which enabled our customers to track their arrhythmias at home. And initially, as you can imagine, it was a tough sell because nobody knew what actually AFib was, and the few people who knew it was, they would go to their doctor and then use the traditional methods to detect and treat them. So it took us quite a while to get there, and so now we have a well-established business model where people are aware of AFib and other arrhythmias that they could be detecting. So and then on top of it, we built a SaaS model where we are adding value-added services, right? This is where we put some of our advanced AI behind a paywall, and we are also offering other value-added services like cardiologist overread, because our AI today detects only 6 of 30 possible or 25 possible arrhythmias that are there. So there is also a cardiologist overread available, and then there is also telecardiology services, etc. So if you are subscribing to this, and I already showed the slide, we have around 275,000 subscribers who are paying out of their pocket. So that drives our consumer business, right? And the interesting question that, largely, some of this actually scales to Europe as well, because that's also an advanced kind of medical systems there. Even though it's not directly translated, most of our revenues are out of US. India poses a really, really challenging problem, because we tried to replicate our business model in India, we failed miserably. Because none of the devices that we are selling or the services we are selling, we are able to sell in India, just because there is no awareness of atrial fibrillation, which is the leading cause for strokes in India. The first time anybody sees a doctor or a cardiologist for their heart-related issues, whether they're having a stroke or some kind of heart block. So that's the only time that they're getting any cardiac care. So there's simply no awareness. In fact, it was shocking to me when I was talking to one of the leading cardiologists there that why is there not enough awareness about AFib? His answer shocked me. He said, because it's not profitable to diagnose AFib. This was the exact answer. It's not profitable from a doctor's point of view because the traditional treatments that are expensive and that make money for the doctors and the hospital systems, they are like cardioversions and ablation. So these two are the methods that are used to correct an AFib, beyond medications, right? These two methods have rarely been deployed in the hospitals in US, which means that even if you are able to detect AFib, nobody is making money. So he said that, well, that's why, this hasn't taken off. So now, our challenges are, but we don't want to give up because people are discovering these cardiac conditions too late. How many of our relatives have died, or friends have died relatively young because they die all of a sudden? No. That's so sad to hear. And it's never sudden. That's what I was saying. If you have the proper technology to monitor this, some of these signs are early enough that you can catch them. So there is a lot of work left on our side to educate people there and doctors there, and then get this business model going there. And 12 lead is a different one because 12 lead is meeting an unmet need there, which is they only care about detecting heart attacks in remote areas and locations. This could be a lifesaver, the technology we built. We are not yet cleared in India, but we are going to get cleared in India very soon, and then there'll be a new business model there where we are going to make it so affordable that even the remotest of places, they should have a 12 lead device monitoring this.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that. Those of you who follow me on Twitter, I actually talk about examples of Indian Americans dying of these conditions at a very early age, in 40s. There was a yoga guru who just passed away while hiking in the US. Jan?
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant point. So my mom is a general practitioner, and we were young, she did house calls. And nobody does house calls anymore, right? So starting in the 70s, 80s, I think we saw a big rush of physicians moving into hospitals because of the promise of more technology, less administration, etc. And then the technology was introduced in hospitals, the EHRs, with the promise to make the lives of these physicians better. Turned out it was a billing optimization tool, right? So we focused on using technology to optimize billing. And as a result, the physicians started working for entities, hospital administrations, insurance companies, that don't even pretend to be there to optimize clinical outcome. They don't even pretend to be there to optimize the patient's well-being. So you see a lot of physicians that are trapped in that system. So what we think we need to do related to the business model is we need to turn the tables. We need to make sure that instead of technology companies trying to sell their things to hospitals and physicians, we need to make sure physicians start to work with and for tech companies. And in the US with the MSO-PC structure, that's entirely possible. So what you need to do is, as a tech company, we believe you have to create the environment where the technology is available and then put the physician in there and let the physician be the physician, treat the patient, interact with the patient. And the advantage is, going back to the business model, probably the best way to succeed is find a very big pile of money and go sit as close as possible to that big pile. $4 trillion every year is already spent on healthcare, so there is no shortage of money. You just have to make sure you can sit as close to it as possible. If, as a MSO technology company, you can tap into all these existing CPT codes, and there are plenty of them, you already have access to the money. If you're a tech company and you try to sell it to the hospital, the first thing they ask, what's the relevant CPT code? And you're gone for 5 to 10 years trying to get one. So that's, I think, part of the business plan is make sure you go and sit as close to the existing pile of money as possible.
That's great. Raj, you get the last word on this, and then I'll open it up to the audience. Hello?
Yeah, I love the discussion about awareness, because fundamentally our business model has not changed, right? There's still a patient and there's still a doctor, right? And there's an exchange that happens between them. I think what we've been trying to focus on is two aspects. One is raising awareness. Like Siva said, most cases just go undiagnosed. With Invisalign, with a more perfect occlusion, you reduce the risk of long-term periodontal disease, right? Once you start aging, you don't have to go through things like crowns, bridges, and so on. So having a good occlusion and a straight smile is actually beneficial for long-term oral health. So by raising awareness through these types of at-home visualization solutions, we're actually trying to get more patients to go seek treatment with their doctors, right? That's one aspect. And I think the second aspect is really the scale opportunity. I think we here are lucky in the US that we have a dentist, around the corner, right? It's easily accessible. But the reality is if you go to the global south, like in India, for example, the reality is that there are just not enough dentists, right? And there are just not enough doctors. Imagine being in rural India and trying to seek treatment for your occlusion, right? You're just never going to find a dentist within driving distance. So by using technologies like remote monitoring, what we're able to do is allow a dentist, perhaps in a major metro area, remotely monitor patients from perhaps hundreds of miles away without necessarily them physically being there, right? So one by raising awareness and the other one by expanding access to care and allowing clinicians to scale is how we're fundamentally able to supercharge the existing business model that's already been there for many, many decades. So,
the last point about access, I think that can be a whole other session, and I hope there is another session where we can talk about that, because that's really the holy grail of healthcare. We all want to solve all the needs of every single patient that we can. I mean, that's why we do the work we do. But unfortunately, today we can't because of the constraints that we just talked about. So with that, I'm just going to open up. I think we have time for maybe 2 questions. Rakesh. You want to repeat the question so that it'll go in the recording?
What's that?
You want to repeat the question?
Good. So the question was, what made Invisalign go to Brazil, right? Because historically, medical technology started in the US and then they expand to the global south, India, Brazil, and so on, right? Yep. Yeah. Yeah, for us, when we kind of look at the global opportunity with Invisalign, there's about 600 million consumers, like we talked about, right, that could benefit. And the reality is that they're geographically spread out all over the world, right? Brazil just so happens to be one of the larger markets that we decided to go, sooner rather than later. But the reality is we ultimately want to go to every single market, right? And we ultimately want to deliver personalized smiles for every single patient. If you kind of look in a more detailed fashion, every smile is unique, right? This is why, when you look at forensic science TV shows, they tend to match patients or, essentially cadavers through their dental records because it is unique, right? So a smile that a Brazilian patient may seek or that they may currently have could be very different from a smile that an American patient may want. As an example, in Scandinavia, they're not a big fan of our what we call as like American Hollywood smiles, right? Which is like big teeth, white, shiny. It's very kind of prominent, right? They don't consider those smiles to be attractive in Scandinavia. They like a more of a subdued type of look, right? And that's their cultural preference, right? So for us, Brazil was a big cosmetic opportunity, but we're trying to expand Invisalign access beyond just cosmetics, right? Because of what we talked about. If you have a healthy occlusion today, when we're relatively young, we have a much higher chance of preventing downstream issues once you get to your 60s and 70s. My wife's a prosthodontist, and she sees a lot of older patients who've unfortunately not had good occlusion and good oral care when they were younger, and now they're essentially having to replace all their teeth. So it caused a lot of issues. You're not able to eat the foods that you love. So we're trying to expand the access of Invisalign beyond cosmetics to more of a, hey, this is a oral health issue that you should be concerned about when you're relatively young so that you have a good runway and can stay with your natural teeth all the way up into your retirement years, right? So Invisalign now, I'm not sure if all of you know, it's applicable to children as small as 7 years old who have historically been treated with wires and brackets. And you can imagine it's not a good experience for kids, especially if you're high schoolers. You can imagine no one wants to walk around with braces, right? So we've expanded the market both on the front end with children, but also on the senior side as well. And it's been working out pretty well. But ultimately, the goal is to go to every single market.
Yeah, a question in the back.
So you're
let
going to
me
ask for a
just-
discount? I'm not going to give you a discount. Just kidding.
So do you want to repeat the question, Siva, and then respond?
Yeah, I think the question is, how does the AI reduce the overall healthcare costs, right? In our particular case, right, I mean, basically we have an offering of health coaches, basically as a part of cardiovascular health management. I mean, initially we led with human coaches, the coaches that will have a one-on-one connection with each of the patients trying to manage their health, and then walk them through certain regimens so that they can maintain their health. So this was the traditional way of doing, and that there are still companies that are making a lot of money doing this. But with the generative AI, the health coach can be so good. We are just scratching the surface. We introduced the initial portions of health coaches, the generative AI-based health coaching, that can be 24/7 accessible, monitoring various vital parameters that we are collecting from the patient and offer them advice. So this brings down the overall cost of providing this coaching as a company for us. And then as in line with our mission, what we are saying is that we want to democratize the access to cardiac care and then make it more accessible, more affordable to everyone. So when our costs come down, we are able to offer these subscription services at lower cost to our employees. So it's a direct impact of what AI can do and how it can lower cost eventually to subscribers. I just quoted an example from what we are doing. I'm sure there are more.
Yeah, Jan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the question is also, we say healthcare is expensive, and it is, but the question is it truly at the core so expensive? So for instance, you can buy a CT scanner for $250,000. A machine can take a lot of images very quickly, and even Medicare pays $200 per CT scan. So the margins on these things are pretty high. So the question is really, what is the real cost, and can we find let's say, a system which is more maybe transparent, where the free market works better than what it is currently doing, and that potentially could already lower a lot of the costs. I think the other thing, of course, is the digitization element of it. There's a theory from the 6Ds that says once you digitize something, it follows that same line that ends up with being something that is democratized. For instance, music. In the 1500s, the only way to get music was to have an orchestra next to you playing music. Now, pretty much, you have all the music in the world on your phone for what, $10.99 a month, something like that. So digitization eventually will have the same effect in healthcare. Imaging, again, is a nice example. So this radiologist that probably earns between $500,000 and $1 million a year, in theory, you can replace them all tomorrow already. It's not going to happen, but in theory, the algorithms in radiology are already proven to be more accurate than the individual reader. So you'll see the digitization move, maybe not as a revolution, but definitely as an evolution towards, I think, more digitization, lower cost, and then hopefully the tech companies can become more logistics company to distribute this medical knowledge, this technology, in a way that the volume then can help to lower down the costs and still have proper margins that you would need to have as a commercial company.
Well, on that positive note, I would like to end the session here. I would like to frame one question, not for this panel, but for us to be thinking about. With the new administration, and a lot of pressure, push and rethink on health that this administration is going to do, it's interesting to think about how does it impact health technology industry and health technology community. A question for us to be thinking about. It's going to evolve in coming months and years. There is an opportunity, but also a risk. So it's interesting to think about that, but that's another panel. Thank you. On that note, let's just do a round of applause for amazing panelists here.
you.